Hello, beautiful. I'm your host, Nicole Goff. Welcome to the Ecstatic Life Podcast, the podcast for women who want it all: health, wealth, freedom, authenticity, love, beauty, all of the hidden gems just waiting to be uncovered. This is the podcast for women who are ready to discover their inner creatrix, to discover their inner manifester, and who want to find the ecstatic in every day. Hello, 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 my beautiful Ecstatic Life community. I'm host Nicole Goff. Welcome if you have never been here before. And to all my returning listeners, thank you so much for being here and supporting me. Today, I would like to talk about emotional alchemy, which is essentially feeling all the feels. And so some of you may be familiar with what alchemy is. Alchemy is both a scientific and philosophical tradition, and it has been practiced all over the world. And its main tenet is to understand and to transform things. So most notably matter. Most people, when they think of alchemy, they think of trying to transmute base metals into gold. And that would be the most famous, notable way of thinking about it. But it has also been used and has its base in chemistry and in medicine, integrating speculative thought and natural philosophy, and also can be used when talking about spiritual and metaphysical ideas. But today, I want to talk about it in the context of transmuting emotions. So emotional alchemy is the process of transforming difficult or quote unquote negative emotions or experiences or wounds into positive fuel for personal growth and progress. And it really involves fully immersing yourself in your feelings. So in these quote unquote negative, I don't necessarily like to name things in this way of like good, bad. Like these are bad emotions. No emotion is bad. But these more difficult emotions like fear and anger and sadness, and in fully immersing ourselves in them in a way that we allow them to move through us so that they don't stay stuck. So we don't stay stuck in them, but allow them to be released, to be transmuted. And you can do this in various ways through practicing mindfulness and self-compassion and non-judgmental curiosity towards these internal processes. And then you can reframe them or alchemize them, shift beliefs and concepts, and develop greater wisdom and clarity. And also this helps to build emotional resilience. So today, I am going to dive deep into this practice, and it has been a long practice for me. This is something that I have been developing over years, and I would like to say that I have gotten pretty damn good at it. And it is so relieving once you learn what emotions actually are, what they serve, how they serve you, and you develop such a more healthy relationship with them and see them as teachers, not something that is happening to you, but as really as a compass. It's an emotional compass, a compass to guide you in life, to guide you on the internal processes that are going on inside of you. And so, like I said, I've been practicing this for years. I've been getting better and better, but I used to be, I guess you could kindly say, a spitfire, an emotional spitfire. I was a very emotionally reactive person. I feel deeply. I feel big emotions. And my go to was to turn these emotions around and outwardly face them at someone else, at the other person that was making me, quote unquote, making me feel those emotions. And so it's very important to first off understand that no one makes you feel anything, but these emotions that are arising, these uncomfortable emotions that are arising, are really a mirror. The person in front of you is a mirror that is helping you to look inside and to see the places where you might need some work, some places where you need some healing, where there's some wounds, where you're maybe feeling negative thoughts about yourself, where you have stories that are replaying. And so for me, a lot of this was informed by my trauma. And so my emotions, my emotional reactions that I would have that would come up were a protective mechanism, because in the past I had been hurt and abused and victimized, and these stories that kept coming up, these victim stories that kept coming up through these emotions, were that I had to protect myself. I had to fiercely protect myself. And of course, this is all a subconscious and unconscious thing that's going on. It wasn't an external process. It wasn't something that I was aware of. But these emotions, this reactiveness to them, was really serving to protect me in a way. And, I was lovingly for myself trying to protect myself from further harm. But truly, this wasn't serving me. And this wasn't, emotional reactivity wasn't serving me in any way. And in fact, it was greatly harming my relationships with other people. It was harming my ability to process situations, to even understand and see situations clearly. And so I really hit a turning point with this, with my husband. And uh, marriages are the best mirror for this. Our most important relationships, with your beloved, with your person, they are our best teacher for this, because a lot of times these things, they are ingrained. These traumas, these wounds, this reactivity is ingrained in us in early relational experiences with our caregivers a lot of times, or early childhood friends and these kinds of things. And so the only way that we can process them and move through them is in relationship. And so our lovers are our best teachers for this. And so really the turning point for me was that my emotional reactivity, my anger that would flare up and come out, this protective, like you think like a tiger or a bear. A lot of people, we talk about the mama bear energy coming out, that protective energy that would come out was something that was serving to protect me, to protect my heart from more harm, perceived harm. And when I would have fights with my husband, this would come up in these, huge rage, or, these other big emotions, grief, and so many things would come up that would be so big and overwhelming to him. And when I would bring that to him, when I would allow that to just really spill out and take over, he did not react well. This, as things do in relationship, would trigger his wounds and his patterns, and they would come up and they would meet each other. And the clashes that we had were so painful and damaging. And, I realized in these at the point that I was like, I can't keep doing this. I can't keep having these kinds of fights. It was damaging to our family life. It was damaging to the peace in our household in so many ways. And I decided I had to get control of this. I had to get control of these emotional outbursts that I was having, because it was causing so much harm. And, what I really wanted, obviously, was harmony in my family, harmony in my relationship. And it was completely antithetical to that harmony that I wanted. And so, well, what did I do? The first thing I did was that I started learning to control my emotions. And this this is not a good thing. This was not serving me either. So instead of allowing it all to come up and come out, being aimed at my partner and, attacking him, I turned it around and I stuffed it down. And I learned to control those reactions by pushing them inside, by pushing those emotions down. I tried very hard for many years to be a quote unquote good wife. But underneath all of that, what that was building was resentment and bitterness. And so by stuffing down those emotions, I actually created more problems, different problems, but more problems. These stored emotions, these suppressed emotions had a hidden cost, and I could feel it. When you stuff things down, it lives there like in the pit of your stomach like a rock, and then it would come out sideways. So maybe I wasn't allowing everything to come out in like a fireball in his face, but instead it was coming out in these more sneaky and subtle ways, through sarcasm, or comments behind his back, or intellectual cut downs, or I told you so's, or these kinds of things. And it wasn't healthy either. So on the other end, on those two extreme ends, projecting it outwards and blaming him for my emotions and just letting all that rage fly at him was definitely not helping our situation. But suppressing all of that and telling myself that those emotions were bad and wrong and that I shouldn't have them, and stuffing them down, was causing a whole other array, and namely resentment. That truly breeds resentment when you don't voice your feelings, when you don't accept your feelings and allow them, and you stuff them down in that way. They can't help but to roil in there and create resentment. And so I also, along with that, developed some, coping strategies for that, which again was not a healthy direction to go. And coping strategies can come in all kinds of forms. For me, I took up drinking wine, and that's a very common one for women. We have our glass of wine in the evening or whatever to like calm ourselves down and to numb out. And that's what that really is about, numbing out from those emotions. And that's more suppression. It also can look like shopping addictions or doom scrolling on our phones, on social media. There are all these ways, all these coping strategies that we can take up to try to escape from these emotional realities. And, none of that is healthy or productive, or none of that produces growth, personal growth, or relationship growth. And I noticed another thing that I was doing a lot was really actively delving into what I know to be now as commiseration culture. And so this would be venting. So instead of dealing with the problems in the moment, taking that to my girlfriends or to my mom and venting, shit talking, and instead of letting it fly at him, I'm stuffing it down, and then I'm going and just venting it out to other people, which, again, isn't a helpful strategy. And both of these strategies failed because really it's steeped in victim consciousness, that I was still playing that role of victim. Things were happening to me. Someone was making me feel these emotions. I was being subject to this thing that I had no control over. This was giving away my power and creating a downward spiral. And it keeps you stuck in that narrative. It keeps you stuck in that narrative and revisiting it. And commiseration culture is something that is just so common for women. And in fact, I believe that a lot of our social connection and feeling of community is derived from this. I mean, how common is it for us to get together with our girlfriends and shit talk our husbands and shit talk our lives and just talk about how bad things are and ruminate on things rather than getting together in community in an uplifting, positive way with positive solutions? It's continuing this cycle of coming back to the negative over and over and over and giving away our power in this situation. And so a turning point I had here was really when I came across Kelly Brogan's work. And she has a practice that she calls entering through the upset. And when I came across her podcast and I started learning about this, I really saw how I had tried to make things better. I had tried to control my emotions and make myself better, but that I was missing the mark. And her idea about this was entering through the upset. So actually seeing these negative or unwanted emotions that arise as an opportunity for growth and to actually move deeper into them, to actually really get to know them and to become familiar with them and to find out why they're there and what purpose they are serving. And so in this, by delving into it, by really with curiosity, curiously exploring what that emotion is doing and what is underneath that emotion, what purpose is it serving, why is it there, and what is it there to tell you, then you can learn to practice the art of emotional alchemy. And so this is really, it's not about suppressing the emotion. It's not about labeling emotions as good or bad. It's not about allowing the emotion to take control. It's about transforming your relationship with these emotions. It's about seeing these emotions as signals, seeing them as teachers, seeing them as there for a very important reason, for a lesson, for an opportunity, and to really get curious and to essentially make friends with them and become close with them, become acquainted with them. And so once I began to do this, once I got better at it, once I really started developing this relationship with my emotions, then I would actually find myself in the middle of an argument. You know, if me and my husband got back into an argument that was similar to the ones where I would have the emotional outbursts, the anger, or, you know, feel myself in that like mama bear or tigress energy where I was feeling very emotionally triggered, then I would actually start to catch myself. There would be a higher self-awareness that would pop in and I would see it for what it was, and it would deflate it. It was like popping a balloon. It would deflate all that energy that I had given it, because I had given these emotions so much energy. I had given my ego and my story, my victimhood consciousness, I had given it so much power and so much energy. And when I started delving into the emotional alchemy, it gave me a higher consciousness perspective where I could actually, you know, pop in the middle of the upset and just start laughing at myself. Like, I literally would have times where I would just shift, I would stop, and I would be like, laugh at myself. What are you doing? What are you doing right now? And I would be able to reframe and check it. And I have to say, honestly, that at first caused more confusion and upset, because we get into these patterns. We get into these patterns of fighting, patterns of argument, and to just throw a wrench in it like that is jarring for both people. But for me, it was jarring in a good way. I would suddenly have this, surprise and this lightness. This lightness would come into me, and I would say, "Oh, you're doing it again." And I was able to learn to shift so fast. And as I continued to develop this practice, I have gotten to the point now where I don't get into these high emotional upsets anymore. And it's not because I'm suppressing it. It's not because I'm not feeling it. It's not because I'm stuffing it down. It's not because I've disconnected and become emotionally numb. It's actually because I know myself better now. I understand the process that's happening internally now. I understand my relationship with these emotions so much better that when I get into a heated conversation or a difficult situation, it's so much easier for me to not have to go there, to not have to go all the way into it, to stay in that higher consciousness awareness, to stay not emotionally neutral in a disconnected way, but to not allow those emotions to take over. They can come in waves. Emotions can come in waves, and those waves can be like a tsunami that just takes you down, that just rolls over you, and it feels like a lack of control. And that is how most of us are going around with our emotions. It is, again, like I said, something that you feel like is happening to you. And that is that victim story. That is that victim consciousness, that you are not in control. And again, with these words, I try to be careful with them. I would love it if we could have a new dictionary for some of this, for this emotional intelligence that I think we are starting to develop, because growing up, we don't have the language for it, because emotions don't need to be controlled, and that's not the greatest way to look at it. But to have more awareness, to have more clarity, to have more openness. This is more the state, the feeling of expansiveness, the feeling of not being above it in a, I'm better than you, I'm too good for that way, but a feeling of seeing the bigger picture, of understanding and really knowing these states. And when you understand something, when you know it in that way, it doesn't control you. So, what does this look like practically? How can we begin to develop this emotional awareness, to develop this capacity to work with our emotions, and to begin to have emotional alchemy and emotional mastery? So, one of the first things you can do is, when you're in a conflict, when you are feeling those emotions arise, somebody has said something that triggers you. You get triggered. Everybody knows what it feels like to get triggered. And, depending on what emotion is triggered, you might feel different sensations. But when those sensations arise, to pause and to breathe. So, developing awareness of breath is one of the best and earliest ways to start to get into a better relationship with your mind, your body, your emotions, everything. And so if you can take some deep breaths. So deep breaths, breathing into your belly, and then a longer exhale. And so counting can help with this. So in 1, 2, 3, 4, and then out, and a longer exhale, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this signals safety to your body. So this will help you to not only alchemize emotions, but it also helps for your nervous system to calm down, to send safety signals of safety to your body, to get out of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn response that is the characteristic of the triggering or the emotional reactivity, and to start to send the signal to your body that it is time to calm down and that everything is okay. And so then a lot of times it is helpful to step away, especially in the beginning, especially when you are not practiced in the emotional alchemy, but to actually give yourself a little space. And so if you're talking with someone else saying, I need some time to calm down. I need some time. Can we revisit this conversation later? And regulate your own nervous system. If you can do it in the moment, if the breathing, and as you get better, you'll be able to do that. If you can connect with your breath and calm your nervous system, calm your body and relax, then maybe the conversation can continue. But a lot of times in the beginning, what it really takes is to just give yourself a little break. So if you can sit with the feeling, if you can give yourself a pause, even just to say, I have to go to the bathroom. I have to, something. I need to step outside, and to give yourself 60 to 90 seconds. So that's how long it takes for an emotion to move through you. That's how long it's supposed to be. If we are not ruminating on it, if we are not allowing these victimhood stories and these feelings to just take over and for that wave of emotion to just wash over us, then 60 to 90 seconds, like scientifically, is how long it takes for those emotions to move through us. And so if you can just take a minute or two to yourself to breathe and to sit with those emotions, then after that, you will feel much more ready to come back to that conversation, much less triggered. And this honors that relationship. This honors that other person. This is a much better way to come to conflict than coming with that emotional reactivity and with that blame and that projection. And so if you can sit quietly with yourself and just start to investigate, just start to get curious to see, where are you feeling that emotion in your body? Is it a hot surge of energy? A lot of times anger can move up our bodies, and hot surges of energy, you actually get flush. Your body actually gets hot and it moves up towards your head. Other emotions, maybe it's sadness. Maybe you feel betrayed and there's grief, and maybe that lives in your chest and it's a heaviness on your chest. So actually, like, where does that emotion live and what does it feel like? A heaviness, a pressure on your chest. Maybe it's a rock in the pit of your stomach. So as I was saying, with like the feelings of like resentment, or maybe it's an anxiety, maybe it's a fear that's coming up, and it's a tightening in your chest, constriction, to actually name what that feels like. Maybe it's a tingling. Maybe, when our fight or flight is really triggered, our body actually sends our resources up into various parts of our body, getting ready to fight, getting ready to run, so maybe we get tingling in our legs or tingling in our hands because our body is preparing for some sort of altercation. So where are you feeling that and naming it? Right now I feel this extreme heat and flush coming up my neck and over my face, and it feels like a burning in my cheeks. And to actually name what is happening on a physiological level. And so the next part of that is to really start to investigate, like, what is this emotion for? What is this emotion here to tell me? And what is it protecting me from? Like, what is it serving? So, in those reactions, in that let's go with fight. We're in a fight reaction. It's the anger emotion, the rushing, the heat, and maybe we're feeling the tingling in our hands and we're preparing for battle. So in the past, maybe you needed to be prepared for battle. You needed to protect yourself in some sort of physical way. And so, what is this emotion here to serve? What is this emotion here to protect? And to honor it for that. In the past or in other situations, that might be the best course of action. You might need that. You might need that adrenaline. You might need to be ready to run or to fight. But in this situation, and generally when we're having conflicts with loved ones, it's not necessary. It's not helpful and it's not productive. But you can recognize how it is protecting you, how it is there to serve you, and you can thank it. And you can also let that part of you know that it's not needed here and that it's okay to relax and that it's okay to calm down and to let that go and then allow it to move through you. So the next part of that is to let it pass, to let it move through you. It is no longer needed, it is no longer helpful, and to allow it to alchemize in some way. And so physically, this can look like maybe shaking it off. Crying is one of these things. Crying releases emotions. Dancing, jumping, screaming, shaking your fists or shaking your hands or hitting a pillow. There's all kinds of ways that we can actually allow these emotions to move through us in a physical way. And I've noticed that as I have developed this practice more and more, I don't need those releases, those physical releases, that it's a much quicker process. There's a recognition, there is an understanding, and then the process of the emotion moving through me happens just in a more subtle, natural way. But if you think about the animal kingdom, like, what do wild animals do? Let's say, for instance, like an animal is being chased down by a predator and they barely escape with their life. And then what do they do afterwards? They shake it off. Like you see like horses or zebras or gazelles or deers that, these prey animals, when they escape a predator, they shake it off. Like their whole body trembles and they shake it off. That is them releasing that emotion, that the fear, that is them releasing and physically letting it go. And so different emotions can be released in different ways. In anger, if it's appropriate. I mean, if you're out in public, maybe not screaming at the top of your lungs, but if you're in a private place where you feel comfortable doing it, a scream, a vocalization in that way can be very helpful, or a physically letting that energy out through like hitting something. And you have to be careful with this because you don't want to overindulge it. This isn't to go deep into it in a way that you're overindulging it. Because the point in this exercise in these sorts of situations is to allow it to pass through you, to allow it to release, and to get to the other side of it. And so not to get too deep into it, although there is a time and place for that in shadow work. Just, if you have hours to really go as deep as you can into those things, you can have a ton of healing happen. But when we're in the middle of conflict, when we're in these situations, it's really about shaking it off, to let it move through you. With grief and with sadness, crying, like, everybody feels better after a good cry, usually. That's a way to let it out. But there can be other ways. And even with something like holding yourself and hugging yourself, giving yourself that comfort. But again, with allowing it to move through in some way. And it's all about acceptance. This isn't labeling that emotion as bad and wrong and demonizing it. It's about accepting it and loving that part of yourself, accepting it, understanding it, and loving it. And so when you realize then that it's not serving you in this moment, that it's no longer needed, and you let it pass, then a lot of times you are in a better place to be able to have that difficult conversation, to be able to go back to that conflict. And this is something that I talked about too in the podcast I did about repair. And this is a big part of it. But this doesn't have to just be used in conflict with another person. The emotional alchemy is something that you can do no matter what is coming up. I mean, we get triggered by all kinds of things. Traffic, traffic. Think about road rage. Traffic triggers people. Seeing posts on social media. So many people get totally triggered by social media posts. And, if you are just alone with these emotions, not necessarily in conflict with another person, it's the same process. It's the same process of sitting with the feeling, allowing the feeling, really feel your feels, really feeling that feeling for that 60 to 90 seconds and thanking it and appreciating it and then letting it know it's no longer needed, it's no longer serving, and allowing it to move through in some way. Our emotions are really some of our best teachers. Emotions are portals. Emotions are an opportunity, a sacred opportunity to really get a view of what is happening inside of us, to get a view more clearly of who we are. And each of these upsets, each of these difficult emotions that come up are an opportunity for practice of deeper understanding of yourself and your internal processes. And emotional alchemy is not about control. It's not about changing the bad emotion into the good emotion. This is really all about compassionate self-holding, self-love, compassionately holding yourself, holding these difficult parts of ourselves and giving them the love and the attention that they need. And I think of this like a loving, like grandmotherly energy, right? Like a grandmother coming and holding you through a storm, like wrapping her arms around you and holding you through an emotional storm. And so this is a way that we can give that energy to ourselves. We can give that love and that compassion and that holding energy to ourselves. And so as I'm wrapping up, I want to give a salient example. So I want to walk you through a time recently where I used this emotional alchemy and like show you step by step like what this can look like. And so a wound that I'm still working with is an abandonment wound. And this is a deep belief of not being good enough, not being loved. And this is something that I'm still doing a lot of work with. And so in the past, this has been triggered by my husband over and over and over again, because obviously he is here to be my teacher, to help me to learn to work through this. And so in a recent conflict that I had, he did not keep me informed about where he was going and what he was doing. And this was something that in the past would have triggered me into such deep feelings of despair and hopelessness. And, I would feel such a lack of control in these situations that I would very easily spiral into just such a dark place. And so, a time that I had to really consciously practice this recently, he did not keep me informed. And I started to get those feelings of despair, that the grief that washed over me, the unsafety, the I'm not good enough, he's going to leave me, he doesn't love me, that just started to wash over me. And I felt the triggers. I felt those triggers, very familiar triggers. It's usually a lot of times these same patterns that happen in our bodies. They're well ingrained, that they come up over and over again. And so I felt that washing over me. I felt the tightness, the constriction in my chest, that fear, oh no, I'm going to be left. Oh no, he doesn't love me. And that need for control. and that I recognize as this very clinging, desperate feeling of needing to, reach out and grab something and hold it tight. And so I felt these feelings, I felt these sensations come up in my body. And in the past, I would have started behaving in blaming and controlling ways. So, this is your fault. You're doing this to me. You always do this to me. These these very well-worn tropes that we say. You're doing this to me. You did it to me. And in the past, I would have also reacted in very controlling ways to try to somehow get those feelings for safety, needs for safety, resolved by somehow putting constraints on him. And so I felt all that coming up. I felt that rush of energy. I felt that just heaviness, that weight on me. And instead of going over that edge, instead of just going into those emotions and allowing that state, those thoughts to take over, I quieted my mind. And I went inside and I looked at how those reactions, how that need to control, how that need to blame had served me in the past, why it was there, and I recognized that. I recognized that pattern, and I recognized those feelings as the protective mechanism that they were, trying to protect my heart from pain, trying to protect my heart from heartbreak. And so in that moment, I was able to have more loving acceptance of myself. And so I spoke my feelings from my heart. I expressed my grief. I expressed my heartbreak. I expressed those feelings from a place of vulnerability. And I didn't stuff them down. I didn't reject them. I didn't label them as bad and wrong. I allowed them to be there, but I also recognized, and I verbally said it out loud, how they're not needed anymore and how that is not how I wish to operate within that relationship and in my life anymore. And so that created space. That created space for more understanding, more openness, better communication about the situation, and more freedom for both of us. And in loving and accepting those parts of myself, in not labeling them wrong or bad, and not having shame and guilt about having gone there again, I was able to cultivate and develop more love, more understanding, more acceptance for myself, and to come out on the other side of that feeling more whole. And that is the beauty and the magic of emotional alchemy. By allowing it to transmute, by allowing it to move through me, by accepting it, by understanding it, I was able to create that space, not just in the relationship, not just in the communication, but within myself, to create more wholeness and to create more self-love. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope there have been some nuggets of wisdom within this that you can take on to move forward and to try to have better understanding of yourself, your internal processes. And I really invite you, as with all of these transmissions that I do, to try these practices on, to actually, it's funny to say, but look forward to the next time you are triggered. Look for it and look forward to it as the sacred opportunity that it is to better understand yourself. And when it comes up, whether it's in traffic or with your kids or with your partner or your mother-in-law or whatever it is that really triggers you, to look forward to that as an opportunity to practice this, to take that space, to create that space, to feel your feelings, to allow whatever wants to arise, and to move through you, to recognize it, to allow it, and to see it for what it is there to serve you, what message it has for you, and to use it for that, sacred gift that it is, for transformation, for access to your higher self. And if you do this, I would absolutely I love more than anything receiving feedback from people when they do these practices. What did it shift in you? How did it move you? In what way has it changed your perception or your life? I would love it if you would reach out to me via email, on my social media, leave comments. I love to hear feedback of how these things have helped women, because that's why I'm here. I am here to serve. I am here to be a transmission to help make others' lives more ecstatic, and to take these things that I have learned and to put them out there to the world, to hopefully help others to learn more about themselves as well. So if you would like to go deeper, I do one-on-one coaching, obviously. I am available to have a deep dive on these subjects. Please reach out to me if you feel like you need more support. And I will talk to you next week. I love you all. Goodbye.